So yeah, I'm Kevin Boychuk, and I've been kind of laying low on the social media side of things since the federal election, and stick handling a lot of the control in the last 2 to 3 years with the government and governments. But RB, I usually come here unscripted, and I'm unscripted again, but I listen to what everybody has to say, and usually gives me a lot of good line items to go off of. So here we go. And I'll touch on what RB said just recently about elections, and I think this is important to impress upon all of you. I ran in the civic election in Ward 1 against Darrin Hill. Ward 1 spans between Sutherland, Forest Grove, across the river, all the way through on the west side, which some of the area in Saskatoon West, when I ran for the PPC, I had some of the same voters and supporters in those areas. And one thing I can tell you, if you haven't heard the story yet, it's very clear, and this is not conjecture, this is not conspiracy, this is actual fact. In the civic elections, they count our ballots electronically. Those ballots are counted in such a way that everybody goes up to vote. You see your big 8x10 ballot go in, you scratch off your little pencil piece, and it goes into a box. And those boxes are taken away by somebody, and to be honest, scrutineers can't follow those boxes from point A to point B. Now, when we had our last civic election, if anybody remembers, we had a huge snowstorm. And unprecedentedly, I don't believe there's been any other time in history, unless somebody here could tell me different, that those election ballot boxes and the extension of that civic election went on for, I believe, 5 days. And it closed on the 13th. And if anybody can remember, I think that was a Friday the 13th, if I'm not mistaken. Now, during that evening, my wife and I, she tremendously supported my campaign, my kids, we went around and knocked on doors. I shook hands. They gave me the opportunity to speak at the doorstep. And they would go crazy across neighborhood to neighborhood to pass out election material. As that was happening, I personally probably spoke with at least 1,400 people and shook their hands. Now, of those 1,400 people, when I went to the door, I had 4 that I counted that actually said they were voting for the incumbent, Darrin Hill. And some of my voters and supporters and campaign team here are here today, and I hope I don't scare everybody away here, because we've got a really good speaker coming up at the end, so stick around. But what ended up happening was, during that election night, 4 of the 6 standard polls I won. Electronic balloting, they were counted by a machine, put in by a human being. During the evening, if you noticed, I was ahead to the very last polls, except poll 76 and 77. Those were the last 2 polls to be tabulated. What was interesting was that as the evening went on, it was so close, and I looked at my wife in the house, and we drove out of Sutherland to the election office. And this was during the time where they just started all the fear-mongering with COVID. They had plexiglass up in the election office. They wanted you to wear a mask when you walked in. Of course I didn't. And we weren't able to get very close to these counting machines. They had a laptop in this room. It's contracted out, by the way, a guy by the name of Kyle, who they refused to give me his last name, Kyle, who ran the electronic ballots. with the returning officer. And it was that close, and all of a sudden, they marched in the room with about 6 ballot boxes from a back room somewhere. And I was like, okay, there's a couple polls left to count. So they come in with these 6 ballot boxes. And they had all these staff marching in, very proud of themselves from some back room. They ran these, and from the information that was given to me that evening, those ballot boxes were polls 76 and 77. And in those ballot boxes, they started running these 8 by 10 pieces of paper through this computer, face down. They don't look at the ballots, it goes through face down. And the machine would keep kicking that paper out. They put it in and it would kick it out, kick it out. If it kicked it out 3 times, they would set that piece of paper down beside that electronic balloting machine. And that pile just kept getting higher and higher and higher. So one poll had a pile, poll 76, poll 77, they started doing the same thing. And poll 77 started getting ballots lining up, and that pile kept getting higher and higher. By the time it was all over, they put a thumb drive into this machine to read what the ballot count was. Then Kyle and the returning officer went back to another room that was about another 15 feet away with a door that remained open. And Kyle and the returning officer, forgive me, I forget his name right now. I think he still works for the city of Saskatoon. Get in front of a laptop, and then Kyle and the returning officer are sitting at a chair looking at this computer screen on a laptop, and they do this. Looking back at my wife and I outside, looking at each other, looking back again at my wife outside. And finally, the returning officer approaches the desk, and he approaches us between the phony baloney plexiglass and informs me that, well, we're going to have to leave. We need to go. I said, well, I've been here for half the evening. I knew it was going to be a close race. I was winning up until these 2 polls came in, these 6 boxes. I said, there's no way in hell you're getting me out of here. I said, I want to know if I won this election. So, as it goes, I said, can you tell me what the results are? No, you're going to have to find out from the media. The only way I could find out is to leave the building, walk outside, and check what CTV or CBC or Global was reporting. Okay? So, I complied. Phoned friends that were watching on the TV to see if they had the results, even though they had the results right there in front of them. But when I walked back in, there were still no results. This went on for quite some time, probably 15, 20 minutes. As I walked back in, I was approached again by the returning officer, and he informed my wife and I that it would be best that we go home, that we should go home and we could get the results in the morning when we wake up. I said, no, that's not going to happen. I said, I've waited this long. I said, everything else went very well. Why is there such a problem? Well, he had no answers. He went back to talk to Kyle, and we got this again. Looking at a computer screen, a laptop. The third time he came up, and by this time we finally found out that Darrin Hill had won the election. So my wife and I naturally asked, I said, I know it's a close race. Obviously, I said, we know based on the media, I lost by 56 votes. Then I asked about these 2 piles of paper sitting by the computer. And those two piles of paper, there was 181 rejected ballots from 2 polls, only 2 polls. And those polls were poll 76 and 77, which were the mail-in ballots. Can't make this up, folks. Sounds like an election out of the U.S. Those mail-in ballots ended up knowing the count differential from 56 to 56 to 186 or 181, something like that. There's enough margin of error just in those 2 polls to have an automatic recount. So I asked him what the procedure is. Well, the returning officer, who gets paid a 6-digit salary in the city of Saskatoon, has no idea. He just told us to go home. We'll let you know. I said, no, there's got to be a process. So we asked to have all the tapes from these computers given to us. They did it. They didn't like it. They stayed and they did it. So now we've got a situation coming where my wife, my good wife, is sitting there filling out all the numbers. As this happens, we end up finding out there's 2 anomalies. And those are 2 tapes that are dated January 1st, 2013. 2013. We call the returning officer over again. We get Kyle to come over. And we ask, how is it that these are valid with the wrong dates from that computer? No answers. The best Kyle could explain was that, in fact, this is an anomaly. It happens all the time. Don't worry about it. Right here in the city of Saskatoon. Now, part of the reason I ran for the People's Party of Canada was the fact that the People's Party approached me in a roundabout way because I did so well against an incumbent, a 14-year incumbent in the city of Saskatoon. When RB makes mention of saying how close and the percentages that we had in our constituencies, and when people think for 1 minute, and if you ever ask yourself, well, I don't vote, I'm part of the freedom movement, but I don't vote because I don't believe in the democratic process. I can tell you now, after experiencing that situation, that election civically was 100% fixed, without question. And I'm 99.99% sure. What we need in this process is accountability. And accountability comes with volumes of people coming out. Because when Trump won the election in the United States, love him or hate him, the bottom line is the people, and I don't say left or right, it's the controlling faction of the globalists that are running this world. And we've got them right here in Saskatoon. There's a whole department at City Hall that is funded by your tax dollar that is all about sustainable development and Charlie Clark's agenda and his meetings with Trudeau in back rooms in Saskatoon that you don't even know Trudeau showed up at an airport.
It's bike lane, Charlie.
It's happening here. It happens at every municipal level when they start telling you to count the county of Wainwright, Alberta. Simple things that are happening in rural areas of Canada to break the spirit of the rural people. Counting animal units, that you need 5 acres of land to have 1 animal unit. Those 5 acres of land will sustain 4 chickens according to the Sustainable Development Program in the county of Wainwright. And do you know what? If you have 1 cow and 4 chickens, well, you got to decide whether or not you want a cow or you want 4 chickens. Because Because you can't have both, because you're breaching your animal units. So why I tell this story about the election, because I tried to appeal at the Queen's Bench Courthouse right across the street, and I got a green sticky note from a Queen's Bench judge that was so poorly handwritten, I could barely read it. I had to give it to my wife because she's got great cursive handwriting. And this wasn't cursive, this was just bad. And she deciphered the note I got from a Queen's Bench judge. Now you tell me we're not bought off politically or corrupt. I'll tell you right there, that's one house that is corrupt as hell. And what we need to do, as Joe Bargot talked about, it's going to be good, honest, truthful, speaking people with some morals. When I ran for the civic election in Saskatoon, I ran on a statement of core values and core neighborhoods. Sustainable development doesn't want core values and core neighborhoods. They want to pretend that they're creating core values and core neighborhoods, like the 15-minute cities, like keeping everybody down and controlled, those orange little bikes that just showed up here to keep you on those bikes and stay within your limits. Core values and core neighborhoods, and I'm going to tell you a story, and this is why I'm so pleased, and I'll wrap it up right after this, because I never ever know what I'm going to say when I get a mic in my hand. But I'm so absolutely pleased as punch that I got a guy like Joe Bargot here today, and I'm going to tell you why. And this will personalize it. My parents, who were kicked, my grandparents and great-grandparents on my mom's side, were kicked out of Ukraine/Poland on the border many, many years ago at the turn of the last century, early 1900s. And I think it's important to remember where we have come from. Remember your roots, remember your grandparents, remember Vimy Memorial, who has died, even though you can dig in the weeds and go down those rabbit holes and say all those men sacrificed their lives for our freedom between World War I and World War II, and it was all made up. But the controllers of this world had to justify these wars and these deaths, and then they had to give us a little bit of bait. They had to give us some freedom back, right? Between these big moments in time, moments in history that we've experienced. So they've done this. And now this is their last stand. It's a global stand. It's World War III, 100%. You can't convince me otherwise. So a gentleman like Joe Bargot, I have a business, Mark Friesen's got a business. I'm peanuts compared to what Joe's running in St. Brew. In terms of volume, sales, monetary influence, money. But what Joe brings and what he brings to me is when my grandparents and great-grandparents came to this country, they settled in an area around Yellow Creek, Tarnapal area, about 15, 20 minutes northeast of Waka on Highway 41. And what's really cool about this is that's not too far from St. Brew. I've never met Joe Bargot. I know about him, but I know how hard the work ethic of that family still is in that little community, and what keeps that community alive. St. Brew, Saskatchewan, is a 15-minute city, people. And I mean 15 minutes from the standpoint that everything about what Joe and his family has done in that community has made that community grow and flourish and become a huge mark on the Canadian map and landscape. When I think about areas that I grew up in, branch lines of trains going across this province that existed in the 60s, and I saw the tail end of that in the 70s. The important things that we hold true to values. Farming communities, rural areas that sustained the cities, the cream cans that came out of Tarnopol, Saskatchewan with livestock yards. You drive by Tarnopol, Saskatchewan now, there's one old farmyard that's abandoned across the road from where the little hamlet used to stand. There used to be 3 general stores in that little hamlet. 3 of them. Unfortunately, Tarnopol, Saskatchewan didn't have a Bourgault family. And Tarnopol doesn't exist anymore. And I would venture to guess that Joe, standing over there, would agree 100% if his dad, his family, never continued with their ideas and their thoughts and their integrity and their core values to believe in helping other people, keeping jobs, keeping a livelihood, keeping a life. And what we have right now, as before this whole thing started, we have Saskatoon City Police that are undercover right now. Some of them are here watching right now. And I can spot them out pretty easy. I had 18 years in corrections and public safety, so if you think you're fooling me, you're not. I approached 2 of them over there, one uniformed, and as I approached him, he had one little V on his shoulder. I don't know what that means. I don't think that's staff sergeant. I don't know what it is. But Al, I'll call him Constable Al. His last name starts with a D. He recognized me. I was walking across the street. And what really bothers me is there's no $2,800 tickets to write today because we don't have these phony baloney restrictions for meeting publicly, yet they're still here. Why? Why? Because we're in a communist state of control. We are in a fascist state of control. 100%. I approach him and try to personalize it. Well, he knows, oh, my daughter and my son, we trained together at a hockey rink years ago, and he knew my first name, my last name. Well, you'd think he didn't have the intel. Do you think his memory's that good from 4 or 5 years ago? I don't think so. He knew exactly why he was standing over there next to his bicycle, and as soon as we start engaging in a conversation, another bicycle shows up with a guy that's just wearing a purple shirt with short sleeves, cut off jeans or shorts, and a nice big tattoo on his one right calf, all tanned up with his gray salt and pepper hair that's cut shorter than even mine. Well, it's screaming plain clothes cop, right? So I'm trying to humanize my conversation with Al and ask him about, how the members of the Saskatoon City Police are feeling, and, well, I can't talk about that. Well, I said, I'm not talking to the uniform, Al. I said, let's just have a conversation. I want to know what the members of the Saskatoon City Police are thinking about what's going on and why you're being here today. Oh, I'm not here today. I have a call to attend. Okay? As this goes on, I said, well, what about your undercover guy right next to you? Well, he denies that he's undercover, first of all. But yet, Al's having this conversation with me, and he's not worried at all, one bit, that this stranger is next to us on another bicycle, sitting there listening to our conversation. As we leave, because Al's scared now, this is your Saskatoon City Police, your taxpayer-funded police force. He's scared, he leaves. And as I'm leaving, I cut across the street right over there where that white truck is right now. And the guy on the bike in the plain clothes says to me and looks over his shoulder after he takes my picture and says, "You're jaywalking." Can't make it up. Happened today, real time. So the bottom line is we are being controlled, we're being coerced, and why I say that last story, I make a point, even though I may not be big on social media right now, and I tend to funnel everything through Mark, If I find something and if he hasn't seen it or posted it yet, I'll run it through Mark because I just don't simply have the time. But I make a point, and I want to leave everybody with this last message. Every day, I make a point of doing it at least once a day, and if the opportunity presents, I'll do it 2, 3, 4 times a day, and I will say and express to a complete stranger in a very nice way, and I'll work into the conversation about the World Economic Forum. I'll work in a conversation about the history of post-World War II, 1971, the creation of things like the World Economic Forum, Klaus Schwab, bring all these things up in a basic conversation. This is what we all need to do. You don't have to stand at this mic to make that impression. All you have to do is leave one with a stranger every single day, and you multiply that message thousands and thousands and thousands of times. That's my message today. Take your knowledge, take your truth, spread that truth to everyone, like Donna about the schools. Everything has to be done. I do it on phone calls when I'm phoning for parts for equipment to some guy in Ontario that never heard of this. And they want to listen. Trust me, they know there's weird shit going on, but they can't connect the dots. Oh, what do you think of Pierre Poilievre? Holy smokes, that's an open question. But I know how to answer that, and so do every last one of you that know this. Spread that word, spread it nicely, be gentle, be kind, and find the opportunity to say, Greg's distributing the other day. I walked in, and this is the last one I'll tell you. Walk in the line, and everybody's still social distancing. No signs on the floor. Nothing going on. Anybody been to Greg's Distributing here? Let's see some hands. There's got to be a few people familiar with that place. You got an automatic sliding door, and it's a pain in the ass. It's not 30 below outside, and some guy standing way at the back of the line, number 8 in line, and the door is opening and closing. So I walked in there with my young employee, 19 years old, and I walk up to the front of the line, and I turn around, look, and I said to everybody in line, and this is what I mean by an example, what you can do every day. I turn around and look, and I said, and I embarrassed the hell out of these young guys. They don't like it. Hey guys, I guess I heard COVID's over. I said, there's no more social distancing. Let's all get in here and be friends. And holy smokes, there's a couple people that start smiling. A couple people that don't have a clue what to do with themselves. But they all start moving in. Well, what has brain damaged us in the last 3 years? Social conditioning. Let's wipe it out, people. It's reality. We need to change that. And you can do that every single day of your life. Thank you very much.